Arizona's Copper Valley had always been steeped in tales of legend, but none more enigmatic than Catherine Kate Reynolds. For 7 years, she lived in quiet solitude on her desert ranch, known to locals as the ex-Marine who had claimed one of the most unforgiving pieces of land in the county. To those at Manuel's Cafe, where she sipped her black coffee each morning at 6 a.m. sharp, she was just another hardworking rancher. Few knew that this unassuming woman had once outshot Santiago Reyes, the deadliest cartel enforcer in the Southwest, in a feat whispered about but never officially recorded. The oppressive summer heat shimmered over the desert as Kate stood on her porch, her calloused hands cradling a steaming mug of coffee. At 42, her sun-worn face and modest rancher's attire blended seamlessly with her surroundings. Sheriff Tom Martinez, one of the few who saw beyond her quiet demeanor, often observed her with a mix of curiosity and respect. Her vigilance wasn't just habit, it was a mission. 7 years of careful observation, intelligence gathering, and meticulous preparation had turned her unremarkable ranch into a fortress designed for one purpose: to face the inevitable. When Marcus El Coyote Ramirez and his resurrection riders rolled into Copper Springs, the tension in the air was palpable. Locals shuttered their doors, while Sheriff Martinez and Kate sat inside Manuel's Cafe, quietly analyzing the threat. Kate, unassuming in her window seat, identified every weapon, every position, and every weak point with a sniper's precision honed through years in the Marine Corps. Ramirez, arrogant and unaware of her true identity, dismissed her as another rancher, leaving behind thinly veiled threats. As the sun set that evening, Kate descended into the hidden basement of her barn, a nerve center of weapons, maps, and intelligence meticulously collected over the years. The Resurrection Riders' every move had been documented, their routes mapped, and their methods studied. To the Riders, Copper Valley was an ideal smuggling corridor. To Kate, it was a battlefield where every inch had been prepared to deliver a decisive blow. The arrival of Sheriff Martinez at her gate confirmed what Kate already knew. The timeline had accelerated. The Riders were moving resources north, and the storm was closer than even they realized. But they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the quiet rancher sipping her coffee at Manuel's Cafe. Tomorrow, the Riders would learn. The same lesson Kate's enemies had learned in the deserts of Afghanistan and the hills of the Southwest. The most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. The silence in Copper Springs was becoming as heavy as the summer heat, carrying the unspoken tension of a community under siege. Sheriff Tom Martinez pulled up to Kate Reynolds' ranch, stepping out of his car with the deliberate caution of a man who had seen too much. Kate emerged from the barn, timing her appearance perfectly, her calm demeanor betraying none of the preparation she had just secured in the hidden basement below. "Thought I'd check on you," Martinez called, his voice steady but laced with concern. "After this morning's visit from our new friends." Kate gave a casual nod. "Just making my evening rounds. Checking fences, looking for breaks." Her words were simple, but Martinez's sharp eyes swept over her property, taking in the high ground and the clear sight lines. "Nice setup," he said, his tone measured, almost like someone chose it for tactical advantage. Kate didn't flinch. "Good grazing land," she deflected. "Previous owners had trouble because they ran too many head. I keep my herd small, sustainable." But Martinez wasn't fooled. "Ramirez and his crew," he continued, lowering his voice. "They're not just another gang. They've taken over 3 counties in the past year. Violence, extortion, trafficking. Nobody's been able to stop them." "Somebody will," Kate replied softly, her voice carrying a quiet conviction. She met his gaze, unflinching, her thoughts drifting to the arsenal hidden beneath their feet. Martinez paused, studying her. "Funny thing," he said finally. "I looked into your background. Impressive service record, but there's a gap. 5 years between your Marine Corps discharge and when you bought this ranch. Files are heavily redacted." Kate's expression didn't waver. "Some files should stay closed, Sheriff." Martinez nodded slowly, accepting the unspoken warning. "Just want you to know," he said, "whatever comes next, you're not alone. This community, we look after our own. Kate allowed herself a brief nod before Martinez turned to leave. She watched him go, her mind already cataloging the next steps. The resurrection riders were escalating, and the town couldn't withstand much more. Their methods were predictable, each move calculated to exploit weaknesses. But Kate had spent 7 years preparing for this, studying their patterns and building a defense they wouldn't see coming. Inside the Riders' command center, Marcus Ramirez and his lieutenants pored over maps and surveillance footage of Kate's ranch. The unease was palpable. "There's more to this woman," Diego, Ramirez's head of security, muttered. "Military background checks out, but that ranch, she didn't pick it by accident." "She's been preparing for us," Ramirez growled, slamming a fist on the table. "Gathering intel, tracking our movements. She's hunting us." The door creaked open, and Javier El Lobo Mendez, the Riders' supreme commander, stepped in, his cold gaze sweeping the room. 7 years, he said, his voice low and calculated. "Ever since Santiago. We thought it was random, a rival cartel. But this," he gestured to the maps, "this is deliberate. She's been playing a long game." Back in Copper Springs, the Riders' presence tightened like a noose. Black SUVs cruised the streets, strangers in polished boots loitered near businesses, and fear crept into every corner of the town. Kate continued her routine at Manuel's cafe, her calm presence a quiet reassurance to the locals who unconsciously gravitated toward her table. But beneath the surface, she was cataloging every move, every threat. When Miguel, Knife, Torres, and Carlos, the ghost, Herrera entered the cafe, their menacing presence silenced the room. "Shame if anything happened to this place," Torres drawled, his tone thick with implied violence. Manuel kept his composure. "Can I get you gentlemen something?" "Information," Torres replied, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Kate. But she didn't look up, her focus on her coffee, her fingers steady on the ceramic mug. The Riders thought they were tightening their grip on Copper Springs. What they didn't realize was that every move they made was playing into Kate's plan. The battlefield had already been chosen, and the trap was set. They were walking straight into it. The tension in Copper Springs had become unbearable, the weight of the Resurrection Riders' presence suffocating the town. Kate Reynolds sat at her usual spot in Manuel's cafe, appearing absorbed in the newspaper before her. Her calm demeanor, however, masked a mind operating with the precision of a seasoned tactician. Every word, every movement of the Riders' enforcers, Herrera and Torres, was being catalogued. About the Reynolds woman, Herrera said, leaning on the counter, his voice carrying a calculated threat. "She's not being very cooperative about business opportunities." "Don't know much," Manuel replied truthfully, his face carefully neutral. "Keeps to herself." Torres smiled, the kind of smile meant to intimidate. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe she needs to learn to be more community-minded." His hand brushed his jacket, revealing the pistol beneath. The implied threat hung in the air, choking the cafe's patrons with fear. What the Riders didn't know was that every word, every menacing glance, was being recorded. Kate's hidden cameras and microphones documented everything, feeding into a growing archive of evidence designed to dismantle their organization. This wasn't just self-defense, it was strategic warfare. When the Riders left, Kate noticed Rosa Martinez's hands trembling. Rosa represented the community's heart, its hope and innocence, and it was exactly these qualities that the Riders sought to destroy. As Kate stood to leave, she placed a reassuring hand on Rosa's shoulder, a rare gesture of connection. "They'll be back," Sheriff Martinez said quietly, joining Kate at the table. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "They will." Kate's exit from the cafe was as unhurried as ever, but the slight smile that played on her lips spoke volumes. The Riders were following her script perfectly, oblivious to the trap 7 years in the making. The following morning, Copper Springs witnessed a spectacle unlike any before. Javier El Lobo Mendez, the Resurrection Riders' supreme commander, arrived in a convoy of black SUVs and armored vehicles, their chrome glinting aggressively in the desert sunlight. Mendez's presence marked a turning point, a declaration that the riders were done playing games. From her seat at Manuel's cafe, Kate watched Mendez emerge. His tailored suit and silver-tipped boots were a far cry from the rough enforcers he commanded, but his movements betrayed a practiced precision. Mendez wasn't just a crime boss, he was a tactician. Quite a show of force, Sheriff Martinez observed, sitting across from Kate. They're done playing nice, she replied, her calm voice contrasting the tension in the air. Through the window, she counted 30 men, their positions precise and military-like. These weren't common thugs. They were trained operators. Mendez entered the cafe alone, his security team stationed strategically outside. Without waiting for an invitation, he pulled a chair across from Kate. "Miss Reynolds," Mendez began, his voice smooth, laced with authority. "I believe we should talk." "Nothing to talk about," Kate replied, meeting his gaze evenly. On the contrary, Mendez smiled, though his eyes remained cold. "I've learned some interesting things about you. That shot in Kandahar, for example, still holds the record, 2,300 meters, crosswind at 15 knots. Very impressive." The cafe fell silent. Mendez's knowledge went beyond public military records. It was a deliberate move, meant to unsettle her, but Kate remained unflinching. "And Santiago Reyes," Mendez continued. "Most people believe he died in a shootout, but we both know it was one shot from an impossible distance. A shot only someone like you could make." "Ancient history," Kate replied, her hand steady as she lifted her coffee cup. Mendez leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've spent 7 years preparing for this. Every position mapped, caches placed, escape routes planned. But let me remind you, one person can't stop an army." Kate set her cup down with deliberate care. "One person did in Kandahar." The room seemed to hold its breath as Mendez's polished exterior cracked slightly, his smile fading. "Careful, Miss Reynolds," he warned. "Threats against me tend to have consequences." "Not a threat," Kate replied, her voice calm. "Just a reminder. You've done your homework. You know what I can do. The question is, are you ready to lose everything you've built over one small town?" Mendez stood, adjusting. His suit jacket, his smile returning but colder than before. "Everything has a price, Miss Reynolds. Even principles." Kate rose, her movements slow and steady. "You've got it backwards," she said. "The question isn't whether I'll sell. The question is whether you'll walk away before I take everything you've built." That evening, Kate retreated to her underground command center, a fortress of technology, humming with activity. Cameras, sensors, and tactical maps displayed the riders' movements in real time. Sheriff Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "You've got company. 3 vehicles heading your way. Doesn't look like reconnaissance this time." Kate studied the monitors. The trucks were modified for off-road use, their reinforced bumpers and extra antennas confirming what she already knew. These weren't the usual enforcers. These were professionals. "Acknowledged," she replied, her voice as steady as ever. The riders believed they were closing in on their prey. What they didn't realize was that Kate Reynolds wasn't just a rancher. She was a predator who had chosen her battleground and was ready to strike. Kate Reynolds moved with precision, her calm demeanor masking the intensity of her focus. 7 years of meticulous preparation had culminated in this moment as she entered her equipment room, a space that was both an armory and a command center. The Resurrection Riders thought they were dealing with a single rancher, but what they had walked into was a carefully orchestrated kill zone. Behind a hidden panel, Kate revealed a topographical model of Copper Valley. Colored pins marked firing positions, supply caches, and choke points. Red strings traced the likely approach routes, each one covered by pre-sighted firing positions. Her radio crackled again as Sheriff Martinez's voice came through. "Mendez is calling in significant resources. My contact in the FBI says vehicle columns are moving north from 3 states." "Expected," Kate replied, her tone steady. She checked her weapons, each one maintained to military standards and tested regularly at her hidden range in the hills. They always overcommit once their authority is challenged. Pride makes them predictable. On another monitor, a thermal imaging feed displayed 8 heat signatures approaching her perimeter, more than just a reconnaissance team. They were probing her defenses, likely aiming to provoke a response that would reveal her capabilities. Kate remained unfazed. Her strategy was built on patience, a quality the riders lacked. Her basement walls were lined with more than weapons. Surveillance photos, maps, and dossiers documented the Resurrection Riders' operations across 3 states, supply routes, safe houses, and corrupt officials. 7 years of intelligence gathering had given her a complete picture of their empire, evidence meticulously cataloged and stored in multiple secure locations. "They'll hit the town first," Martinez said over the radio, his voice tinged with worry. "Try to break the community's will." Kate switched feeds to monitor Copper Springs. Mendez's men were already positioning themselves around town, their movements professional and tactical. But they had underestimated her. "The town's ready," she said, recalling years of quiet preparation. Manuel's cafe had concealed cameras, the school had a reinforced safe room, and emergency supplies were hidden throughout the community. Rosa Martinez and other key members of the town had been trained to recognize surveillance, communicate securely, and resist intimidation. A proximity alarm blinked on her screen. The riders' vehicles had reached her outer perimeter. Kate moved to her concealed observation bunker, her rifle already positioned. Through the scope, she observed their coordinated movements, recognizing their military training. "Mendez hires professionals," Kate noted, her voice calm. "Ex-military, likely former special forces. They're good, but they're predictable." In town, the riders were escalating their intimidation tactics. Hidden cameras captured every threat, every extortion attempt, every illegal act. At Manuel's cafe, Rosa appeared to be casually using her phone, but Kate knew she was recording everything. The data was being transmitted to secure servers, building an irrefutable case against the riders. "They're moving on the ranch," Martinez warned. Kate watched through thermal imaging as the vehicles spread out, taking textbook positions for reconnaissance in force. The lead truck approached her front gate, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Her hand rested lightly on her rifle, but she held her fire. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let them commit fully. Let them think they have the initiative." "You're outnumbered," Martinez said, concern evident in his voice. "Numbers don't matter at 2 miles," Kate replied softly, her mind recalling missions in distant deserts and mountains. "One good shot at the right moment is worth more than an army moving blind." Her secure room contained more than weapons and maps. It housed detailed evidence on every major operation the Resurrection Riders had conducted, from corrupt officials they had bribed to the crimes they had orchestrated. This evidence, distributed across multiple secure locations, was her ultimate weapon, capable of dismantling their entire criminal empire. The riders' vehicles stopped just outside the effective range of small arms. Their lights scanned the darkness cautiously, their movements professional. But they had no idea that every position they took had been anticipated and accounted for years ago. They were playing into a trap as meticulously designed as the weapons Kate wielded. Through her radio, Kate issued a single reminder to the hidden observation posts scattered throughout the valley. "Remember, patience wins battles." The Resurrection Riders believed they were the hunters. What they didn't realize was that they were prey, drawn into a battlefield that had been prepared for them long before they even knew it existed. The Resurrection Riders had made their first serious move at midnight. Kate Reynolds, seated in her concealed observation bunker, watched through her thermal imaging scope as 3 well-coordinated teams advanced on her ranch. Their movements were precise, their discipline evident. They were professionals, likely ex-special forces. She had been monitoring their encrypted radio channels for weeks, cataloging their tactics and timing. They thought they had the upper hand. They were wrong.